So welcome everybody. If you're coming in, do continue to tell us where you're from, and we'd love to see that. I want to welcome everyone today to Housing First Community of Practice series that we do on a regular basis with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness Training and Technical Assistance Program. I am Jody Yurkowski-Pace, and I am joined today hosting this webinar is also Wally Czech, who's Director of the Training and Technical Assistance Program. And Quinn Moriki is going to be presenting. We're going to be talking about self-care. So, oh, I see Natasha from Duncan here as well. I have to give a shout out to her. So we're going to go through a little bit of introductory stuff, and then we're going to get to the good stuff in the presentations. So I want to just give a bit of an introduction to the Canadian Alliance. Most of you already know who we are, but we are an organization that leads a national movement of individuals working together to end homelessness across the country. A lot of you will know us for the conference that we do each year. There will be an announcement about this year's conference, so stay tuned for that in the next week or two. We're also Built for Zero, which is a change effort to lead communities to ending chronic homelessness and veteran homelessness across the country. The training and technical assistance arm of the Canadian Alliance is Quinn, Wally, and I, and we provide expert training and technical assistance across the country to folks who are working to end homelessness in communities. And the allied networks are a number of networks that support the work, or that we support, that the CAEH supports in our shared mission to end homelessness. That was a mouthful. And I noticed that neither of you jumped in to help me with that one, so.
On your own.
Our mission is to work together with communities across the country to end homelessness in Canada. I want to make sure that we're recognizing that this webinar and the work that we do is funded in part by the Government of Canada through the Community Capacity and Innovation Funding Stream of Reaching Home, Canada's ending homelessness strategy. So thank you to them for making this possible today. So a reminder to everyone, this is a community of practice call. A community practice is an opportunity to provide information, ideas, best practices. It's about an hour today. There will be a presenter, which is Quinn, and he will talk to us, and it is going to be uploaded to the website afterwards. Make sure you're on mute. You have a button at the bottom that says mute. It should be muted. You should select it. That is just sort of to be careful. You shouldn't actually be heard at all, but that makes you completely sure that that's not going to happen. If at the end of this you want to say something, we can unmute you and you can speak. So today's agenda, I just went through the introduction. Wally is going to speak a little bit, and then he's going to introduce Quinn. We're going to do a 15 to 20 minute presentation on self-care in a pandemic. There'll be a Q&A and discussion afterwards, and then we will say goodbye.
Awesome. Thanks, Jody. I just wanted to mention Patty on the chat had mentioned she couldn't hear anyone. So if anybody else is having that challenge, let us know. But it's usually going to be an issue with whatever speakers your computer is set to be using. So if you have multiple choices, or if you don't have speakers, you may need to plug in some headphones to be able to hear. It just depends on what your setup is, but it's generally related to your audio settings. And so you'll want to check on your computer or your device or whatever it is to make sure that the appropriate speakers are set. That being said, I am excited to be able to introduce Quinn to everybody. we didn't get this chance really right off the bat when Jody first started, but I'm really happy now to say that I have two really amazing people on my team, and I think we very quickly realized that we are kindred spirits in a lot of ways, which could be good or bad depending on the situation. Um, but we do recognize that we have some very common values and belief systems and things that I think will only enhance the training and technical assistance arm of the Canadian Alliance. And so all of that being said, I wanted to just mention Quinn a little bit more. I've known Quinn for a long time. Quinn comes to us from Homeward Trust in Edmonton. Quinn was doing a boatload of things there in Homeward Trust. Part of his role there was to be leading and supporting the work happening with all of the Housing First programs there, but he was also taking a key role in ensuring a lot of training and necessary support and in-servicing and those kinds of things were happening for their funded projects and multiple other things. And I'm sure that at this point in time, Edmonton is realizing just what we stole from them. So, but we're happy to have him. Quinn was also, prior to this, part of our training faculty. So outside of myself and Jody, I also had a faculty of trainers that I contracted with and still do. But Quinn was one of those people and had done several trainings for me before this opportunity came about. And so I feel very lucky and blessed to have had Quinn be able to apply and to bring him onto this role. And Quinn has expertise in a number of areas, harm reduction being one, a key area that I know he's very passionate about. Housing First in general, he's very passionate about. And also this idea of self-care, which him and I also have a very common belief in. Actually, all three of us do. And so I'm excited to let Quinn's sort of inaugural webinar be in this area, and he'll be providing some great stuff. Jody and I will also be here to answer questions and discuss things. I'm going to sort of take a role in this as a mental health professional. I also I am a clinical psychology, have a practice on the side, and that's what I have done by trade for a good deal of my life. And so I'm going to be a bit of a mental health professional role in this webinar. But what we'll do is we'll let Quinn take over the presentation, let him share his information with us, and then once that's done, we will open it up for discussion. And we hope to have a very lively conversation. If people don't have questions, we will fill the dead air for sure, but we really encourage you to type your questions in. If you could, you should see a Q&A function as well as the chat function. For your questions, if you could actually type those into the Q&A function, that would be great, because then we can have them recorded. But if you don't, if they're in the chat as well, that's fine, but try to utilize that Q&A function if you can. And Jody and I will be monitoring those. And if a question comes up while Quinn is presenting, please type it in during the presentation, and then we'll make sure that it gets brought up. And if at all possible, we would like to actually open the airwaves for you to be able to speak live and to be able to ask your question or make your comment. This isn't just about questions. Many of you, I'm sure, are experts in this area as well. And that's why we call it a community of practice, is we want people to be involved together, to share information together, and to support each other. So that being said, I'm going to close my mouth and I am going to sign off for the moment, and I'm going to shut my picture off. As handsome as I am, you won't be able to see me during the presentation, and we'll let Quinn take it from there. So
Hey,
thanks, and enjoy the presentation.
Yeah.
All right, let me just screen share here. Okay. There. Can everyone see that then? Is that good?
All good.
Okay, perfect. Welcome all you cool cats and kittens out there. I hope everyone is refraining from speaking moistly to each other during this difficult time. I'm really happy and excited to be able to speak with you today, and I definitely want to get through this material as quickly as possible. So I'm going to jump right in. But before I do that, I do want to let everyone know that my pronouns are he, him, and that I am speaking to you today from Treaty 6 territory. So we're going to talk about self-care during a pandemic, right? Now, a lot of people might feel the way that my little dude on the screen feels right now, that you're carrying the weight of housing and the weight of homelessness and the weight of everything on your back. I think that one thing that we need to recognize during this time is that hard is hard. One of the people that I used to sit next to used to have this written on their desk, just above their desk. They said, hard is hard. For them, it was a reminder not to minimize, right? To point out that the essential weakness of the human condition is that we cannot feel each other's pain. And what that means for our experience is that our own pain and hardship is the greatest pain in the world. And what that means is that for you, this is hard, and hard is hard. I recently heard a group of frontline workers talk about, well, yeah, okay, things are hard for us during this period of pandemic, but you know, what's really hard for is this other person and these other people, and what about my clients? And I get it. That stuff comes from a place of compassion, and that stuff comes from a place of caring, and that stuff comes from a place of the same heart that brings people to this role. But don't minimize it. It's okay to not be okay right now. It's okay to look around at the work that you're being asked to do, the anxiety you're feeling, and to say, you know what, this is incredibly hard. That is totally fine. I want to give you and everyone in your communities and everyone in this sector permission to say that, you know what, it's hard right now. You don't have to qualify it. You don't have to minimize it. You don't have to explain it away or anything. It's hard right now. We understand that it is hard right now, but the way it's hard for you is unique to you, and that's totally understandable, and I want to recognize that. Anyone feel like this sometimes, right? When we're talking about self-care, this is something that I have gotten a little bit annoyed with over the years, is that people who talk about self-care kind of talk about it as though it's just like one more thing that you have to put on it, or that it's just using the term self-care without any other direction is like a panacea, that it's just a fix-all for everybody, right? By the way, I love this meme for a lot of things, so that's great. Self-care is not meant to be another job, right? And I think this is where a lot of people, when they're thinking about self-care, go wrong at it, right? Self-care is often presented as, here is a whole bunch more things to do during this time. And that's not, in my experience, really helpful for people that need some support during difficult or stressful times. What I find is more helpful is trying to have a conceptualization about self-care that includes whatever stuff you're doing right now, right? We're all in this precarious moment right now. A lot of people are working from home or really changing incredibly how they can work with participants and how they're going to interact with their jobs. They're not able to work the way they used to work because maybe childcare is an issue at home. That's certainly something for some of the people on our team. Those things are important to recognize, that we already are very, very busy. Self-care shouldn't be seen as a little bit more work to cram into an already oversaturated day. Self-care has to be personalized to you in a way that it's not going to look or feel like a whole bunch of extra work. And I want to tell this right now. Self-care, this is on the title screen as well. So I stole it and put it here just so that I could talk about it at a little bit more length. Self-care is not selfish. Very often, especially when I talk to the beautiful people that work in our sector, that work in the caring or the compassion sector, that work to help support the people experiencing homelessness and other people who are vulnerable in society, they think that, or they tell me anyways, that they feel that any amount of care they take for themselves is selfish, that somehow by taking care of themselves, they're letting their participants down. But you don't understand, man. I can't take time for myself. Carl's on the street right now. Listen, I get it. Carl is on the street right now, and that is a priority, and that is important, but you are not going to be able to help people as effectively if you don't take care of yourself. Taking care of yourself not only helps you feel better, but by feeling better, you will have more to give to your participants. You'll have an easier path to excellence in everything that you're doing, and that's part of why self-care is important. It's not just important because it's healthy for you. It's also important because for those of us that are trying to achieve excellence in what we do in our practice and in the way we serve clients, and when I say excellence, I'm not talking about some kind of weird just, I want to be excellent. I'm talking about I want to impact people's lives for the better in as effective a way as I possibly can. And knowing that and understanding that, self-care is really important to get to that point. Self-care is intentional, right? It's stuff that you have to think about in advance, right? And this is why I think that people start thinking about it as another job, is because even planning at some points can start to think or can start to feel as though too much to take on. So what I want you to do is try to pick a time when you're going to be thinking about your week and start to think about a few things that you might be able to integrate into your week if you are able. So some tips would be go outside if you're able and it is safe to do so. Right? It's not for everybody in every living situation. And for some of us out here who keep getting dumped with snow on and off at this point in the year, it's not that comfortable to go outside, I guess. But going outside, or at least engaging in natural light, getting some wind on your face, is really important during this time, right? And for those of you that are extroverts, we get it. You are suffering right now. My partner is an extrovert, and they are having struggles right now, trying to deal with staying inside, and it is not easy on folks. I want to talk about restricting your news and social media. Right now, while everyone is a little bit homebound, people tend to spend a lot more time on social media, and that's a very natural thing to do. I want to say that use the liberal use of the mute button at the very least for right now for some of the more toxic media sources. Maybe restrict the news you're getting, particularly the news about the pandemic, to a couple of trusted sources, and then just block everything else out, because the flow of the constant barrage of news can become overwhelming and can add to your stress. If you can, due to your situation, your living situation, as well as your personal, physical, and mental health situation, try to exercise. It doesn't have to be anything crazy to exercise. Making sure that you're standing for, a while, or making sure that you walk around the kitchen island, or stand up and sit down from your desk chair or your couch as a way to start doing something that approaches squats. Those are all legitimate and shouldn't be looked down upon, but just moving in some way is really, really important right now. It was important before, it is incredibly important now. And engage in your culture and spirituality. In no way am I trying to proselytize anyone by talking about this, but this is a source of strength. If we're thinking of people as holistic beings, as people who have more than one aspect, various holistic worldviews take into consideration that people are spiritual beings as well as their psychological being, as well as other physical beings, and so on. And what we want to do is to give people permission to start to engage in those things, right? If you have cultural practices, look to those for guidance. If you have spiritual practices, look to those for support and comfort during this time. In your work and your practice, focus on the possible. And this is incredibly important. We can really hurt ourselves right now by only focusing on that which we think is the most important. We're not good at deciding what's the most important right now when we're under great deals of stress. Focus right now on the low-hanging fruit. Focus right now on what is possible. Focus on what you can actually achieve in the short or medium term. That's where you want to spend your energies. Because if you focus on all your energy and time on things where you're not going to necessarily get any returns, or you're not going to feel like you accomplished anything right now, it's going to be very draining for you. What we're finding out about the pandemic is this isn't a sprint, right? This is a marathon. We need to pace ourselves. Get a check-in buddy. I actually have a friend that I check in with every Thursday morning on Facebook Messenger. And it kind of started out as me checking in with them because they were going through a tough time. And so I set an appointment in my calendar, said, oh, check in with this person. But since then, it's become a really important part of my week. My suggestion is to find a friend that you trust, that you can chat with a few times over the course of one day or multiple days, and then actually put it into your calendar as a time, as a reminder, as an appointment, and stick to that. Just to check in, say, hey, this is what's going on in my week, what's going on with your week, and just to debrief a little bit with somebody. It helps if that person is not in your organization or office, because there might be stressors there that you wouldn't be able to share with a professional colleague in that way, but whatever works for you is fine. Now, as the little dude is drawing, it's important to understand that having a plan and having a routine is very, very helpful for self-care. Now, this is in no way to say that not having a plan or routine right now means you're not doing it right. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that certainly thinking through, if you don't have this, a self-care plan in place, or you're not taking care of self-care things in your life, then making sure that you have something so that you can refer to that or get into a pattern or get into a habit is really, really helpful. And self-care, and this is another piece I think that people get wrong or just ignore a lot, self-care has to be enjoyable for you. If it's not enjoyable for you, you're not going to do it. You're not going to want to do it. You're going to get stressed out about doing it. Self-care needs to look happy to you. It needs to look fun to you, right? Self-care should be something that you look forward to doing, right? And for you extroverts out there, if you're social, your self-care has to be. Very often I see self-care plans fall apart for people because they recharge by connecting with people, and all the self-care things they have is like isolated personal exercise, right? And so they don't follow those things, and then they get frustrated with themselves because they're like, why don't I want to do this? I know that it's important to do. If you're social, your self-care plan needs to be social, right? It needs to be about connecting with other people. And one tip that I was given and I want to pass on to you is to remember your commute. Your commute is the time that you would have spent, especially for those of you who are working from home now, the time that you would have spent driving or commuting to and from the office or to and from your workplace, that time, that is when you can do your self-care, or that is when you can spend time debriefing. My daughter is doing schooling at home right now, and we have built into her schedule the time that she has been on, that she would be on the bus, and that time she has to stop doing any kind of work and has to spend time chatting with her friends online or hanging out or reading a book or whatever, something that's not productive, right? And that has been really, really helpful for her. Things to watch for. When we're struggling with the need for self-care, we're going to see a lot of behaviors, right? That we're going that should point us to being concerned about the amount of stress or whatever that we're dealing with. One of which is difficulty focusing. How many social media posts have I seen about people who thought because they were going to be working from home and had extra time and didn't have to go out and deal with all the extracurricular activities, that they were going to learn another language, that they were going to engage in a whole bunch of extra work. They're finally going to write that book, and they find themselves doing less now. They find themselves learning an incredible amount about the world of southern United States big cats, and getting to know about all kinds of shenanigans regarding that, rather than doing anything productive, or what they think is productive. And why is that? It's because you're under stress. Being at home during this time is stressful, right? And difficulty focusing is a very natural outgrowth of that. You want to watch for increased substance use, an increase in addictions or addictive behavior. For example, non-substance behaviors like shopping online. During this time, these are things that if you see the usage or the engagement in these behaviors or substances start to go up, you may want to reach out to folks for a check-in and some help. Excuse me. Also, trouble sleeping, and I will do a little personal self-disclosure here. I'm having a lot of trouble sleeping since this whole thing started. I'm getting not enough hours of sleep at night, and it's making things during the day a little bit tougher, right? And understanding that and trying to work through that is something that my self-care plan is taking into account as I'm working through the problem. But see, trouble sleeping and your sleeping patterns being all messed up right now, that is absolutely natural, but it is certainly something to keep an eye open for. Also, difficulty managing emotions. And this can go in one of two ways, right? Via detachment, shutting down, or anger, right? Taking your stress out on other people, which are typically your family members right now. But also detachment, which is something I think that we're not talking about. We're all very worried right now about people snapping at each other, but not feeling anything is equally concerning during this period. Anxiety. I don't know if I'm the only one, but have you noticed that there has been an uptick on social media of conspiracy theories? This comes from anxiety. Conspiracy theories we know about, that conspiracy theories tend to come from people and places where people are feeling out of control, and feelings of hopelessness and feelings of anxiety. And so conspiracy theories become very attractive because they provide a comforting explanation of the world. Even if that explanation is terrifying, it's less terrifying than the current reality. that there is no control. At least with the conspiracy theorist, with the conspiracy, I have knowledge of what's really going on, right? But these anxiety feelings are absolutely normal. People that are going through the pandemic right now, people that are working from home, people that are changing how they're interacting with their clients right now, all of these are normal feelings. To be scared, to feel like events are rolling that you have no control over, those are normal feelings. In addition to this, we have headaches or body pains. Headaches and body pains are things that we should keep an eye open for, because we know that the brain can actually cause pain in the body as we go through these issues. I feel like I'm spending too much time, so I'm gonna have to move a little quicker from this point forward. So here we have a few resources now. Those of you that have signed up and registered for the webinar are going to get a copy of the slides, so you're going to be able to get these resources. But I want to talk to you about some solutions now. Self-care is connection. We live in a digital world. We live in amazing times, and those amazing times include the option to connect like we're doing right now, digitally, online, through everywhere. We can do remote dates, right? We can have great hangouts or dates for online. I recently hosted for a dear friend a birthday party in which on one what we did is we had a video chat open on one in one tab, and on the other tab we had downloaded the Chrome plugin Netflix Party, so we could all watch a party together and then talk about it. By the way, Adam Sandler movies have not aged well, but it is what it is. Doing remote hangouts. A few of my friends have just been kind of coming up with times where we all log in at the same time and chat for an hour, right? You know, maybe have a beverage together or hang out and just talk, and that has been really, really helpful. I definitely feel better about having to be socially distant after having been able to do that. Moving a lot of activities online, and I'm going to have a few more specific examples of that, but there are a bunch of ways right now. Anything you can think of that you did in person, if you start to Google solutions for how to do that online, I think you'll find that there's a lot. Also, group and partner exercise. I'm seeing this a bunch come up where people are literally connecting on a video chat and just doing some exercise together. I also have a friend who's a physical trainer or a personal trainer, and they are offering Zumba, which is funny, Zumba. And they're offering it for people to log in and do it in their basements or at their houses and stuff, and that's really, really helpful. New ways of connecting. We know that it can really easily feel isolated when you're mostly connecting with folks over the internet or over text. Wally had mentioned that the Peak Resilience team has been using Zoom not only for virtual sessions, but to see each other's faces. Anyone with a phone or a computer can use their basic plan. Also, for the nerds out there, bummed that your RPG group is on pause. And by the nerds, these are mine, my people. There are online platforms like Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds to facilitate online sessions. You can also play things like Settlers of Catan for free, or access sites like Tabletopia, where you can play with groups of people, play board games digitally. Esther Perel has a great blog post called How to Engage in Social Connections While Social Distancing that has some fantastic ideas that you can check out. But I want to remind people that you must be healthy to build others up, right? This is about making sure that you're okay so that you can help others be okay. It's not selfish, right? And it shouldn't feel like extra work. Focusing on yourself shouldn't stress you out. And if it does, then we're probably doing it wrong. Right? It should be social if you're social. You should take into consideration your commutes. Try to get outside. Try to exercise. Do what you can. Watch for concerning behaviors. But build yourself up. Put on your own oxygen mask before you put on the other person's oxygen mask, which is an analogy I think Jody uses a few times, and I just love it. Here's a few more options. The self-care for frontline workers toolkit from the City of Westminster in the middle there is excellent. The self-care, the Inquiring Mind COVID-19 Self-Care and Resilience Guide from the Mental Health Commission of Canada is there, as well as a small self-care plan. That's a single page. So what you see on the screen is basically what's in it, I think, if I'm remembering that correctly. But it's excellent. It's really helpful if you can print it off or whatever and just write out a few sentences on each thing, just to think through intentionally what you're going to do for self-care. And I love this quote by Vicki Reynolds, whose recent book, if you haven't read it, Doing Justice, I think it is really, really excellent and should be checked out. But our sustainability is connected to knowing and believing that our work matters. On top of everything else, here's what I want to leave you with. Your work matters. You're changing lives. You are saving lives. At a time of unprecedented, never before in our lives experiences, the people that we work with need our help and are getting our help. And the people that I'm seeing out in the sector that are being creative, and they're being fiercely intelligent, and they're being excellent ambassadors of the types of justice that they're engaged in, give me hope. Like, I believed in you before the pandemic started, but it is an amazing thing to have watched the great work that you have done so far, and it's going to be amazing as we go forward. If understanding that the work that you do is important is going to help you going forward, I need you to hear me right now. You're important. Your work is important. You're changing lives, and you're changing the future. And with that, I think we're done.
Quinn, thank you. I could see while you were talking a number of people sharing information, commenting on what you were doing, what you were saying. A lot of people saying, yeah, I'm having a hard time staying awake, or I'm having a hard time sleeping. Both actually. A couple of people said that, you know, they're having a hard time not crying. Or I know in my family, there's one person who's getting angry a lot, and she's only 6. Our feelings are all over the place, and so you've really named a lot of things that I think that people on the call today could identify with. They definitely said that.
Yeah, I think that that's important to keep in mind, is that those feelings that you're having right now, I don't know if people can hear my son crying in the background, but if you can, I apologize. Those feelings that we're having right now are absolutely legitimate. And not only they're legitimate, they're normal. And so I don't want to start the vicious cycle of having a feeling that I'm concerned about, worrying about that feeling and obsessing about it, then making that feeling worse, and then having that feeling, and so on and so on. Stopping it with just recognizing that those things are legitimate reactions to a incredibly strange circumstances. Understanding we're living through a moment that our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren are going to be reading about in textbooks is important.
We had a comment from someone saying, and I totally relate to this, guilt on not checking or checking those catch-up things off and being a couch potato for unexpected downtime. And so she's saying she read 2 novels in 36 hours, which was awesome, and then had horrible guilt over wasting 2 days instead of doing all of that. And
which leads you to believe that it's not the actions, right? There's something else going there, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm a putterer, so I have a hard time sitting down and doing things, and I have had that same guilt of, I'm looking around going, I have nothing that I need to do right now, but there's got to be something I have to do, right? So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that those things are all legitimate. Now, are there questions that we're meant to take from the people? I'm not sure.
We had one comment that I just spoke to, and I don't know whether or not
Oh, I see.
Amy, who mentioned this, wants to speak to it more, because we can definitely.
There's a couple of questions in the Q&A as well, but I wanted to actually, there's something, and I'm hoping she'll speak to this. Heather Elliott made a comment in the chat about the crying, and I think it'd be important for her to share what she said, if she will. So I'm going to just allow her to talk. You should be able to speak now, Heather, I believe, if you're able to. If you don't have a mic, that's okay.
Hi, yeah, I have a mic.
Great.
Yeah, I've always considered crying as a cathartic process. My mom passed away when I was quite young, so I allow that emotion to overtake me and just kind of cry it out every now and then. And generally it's kind of irrational in the sense that it'll be something quite insignificant that kind of triggers it. Like I'll be watching a home improvement show and somebody gets this wonderful makeover and I'm just so happy I cry. But I think it helps personally in the long run, so that when you're facing the hard things that I, as a ministry worker in the work for the Ministry of Social Development, face on a daily basis, hearing the really bad stories day in and day out, and not letting them affect me. That's sort of my, it's, to me it's a cathartic and it's a bit of a healing process.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Heather, because I think it's really important for us to, first of all, acknowledge that, I mean, there's huge amounts of research and science even out there about the value of crying from an emotional perspective. And so, you know, I think that's important to know that any of that is okay. And it's kind of a question mark. Is it really irrational or not? Or is it your body telling you that you just need to release? And so I think we have to be careful to not assume that if we're just crying, that it's a bad thing. And if we don't know why. But I also think that what this highlights is the value of understanding that there isn't a single emotion that you might experience in all of this that is negative. Emotions are not the problem, right? What the challenge can be is the things that we choose or not choose to do to address those emotions. So don't be afraid of the feelings. They are what they are. It's are we choosing healthy, appropriate, helpful ways to handle those feelings? And you know, and so I think that's what that brought out for me, Heather. So I appreciated your comment there.
We've got a couple of other ones here, and Krista in Truro, I don't know if you want to speak to this, but you've talked about how, you know, the reminder about validating feelings and not going into problem-solving mode. So when you're talking to people who are having strong feelings about everything, you know, are you looking for me to help you fix this, or just listen right now? And
Yeah.
because I think that we're all problem solvers. in this field, and we want to just solve the problem and dust it. And I think that we're in a situation right now that is unprecedented. We can't put a Band-Aid on this one. And so it's really difficult.
Somebody else in the chat had mentioned Brene Brown, and when it comes to that topic, Jody, I know Brene Brown would agree with this, that's actually not empathy, right? In solving problems, that's not empathy. And what empathy is really just making sure that we can either identify with a feeling that someone else is experiencing, or two, just being able to be with that person through that feeling and emotion. So you don't have to feel guilty if you can't say, I've been there, or I understand, or whatever. Sometimes the most helpful thing for someone else is just that you're there and willing to listen.
Yeah, one of the most powerful statements that someone shared with me was the phrase, "That sounds hard." And what they said is they started using that at parties when people told them about their work, which is often the most boring thing you can talk about at one of these parties. It's like, what do you do for a living? Well, I do this, 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 and this, and this. And then you try to move on because that sounds really boring. And this person started saying, that sounds hard, no matter what the work was. And every single time the response was, it really is. And here's why. And then the conversation actually, first of all, became interesting. But second of all, you felt there was stress and pain underneath there that people suddenly were given permission to talk about. So I think the empathy, the having the way to validate people when they share those things and say, that sounds hard, is really good.
Jody, can we go to, there was an early question in the Q&A from Abir Hussain, who asked, how can we stop ourselves from purchasing unnecessary things online? It starts to feel like a necessity, even if it is not.
Yeah, no one wants to see how much I spent at IKEA today online. Absolutely. Totally get it. But I, in defense, needed deck furniture, right? Because we're going to be spending a lot of time outside.
I don't know if there's more that Abir wants to say about that, but I have a couple of thoughts, but I don't know, do any of you have any comments about that?
Listen, I'm an online shopper to begin with. The key here is not to, the key here for me, and I'll just speak for me, is not to say, oh, any online shopping's bad. That's not real, right? What is real is, do I actually need this? Am I shopping right now because I need this item or I desire this item? Or am I shopping right now because it's going to make me feel better and distract me from my life? And those are very, very different things. And a little bit of radical self-honesty right now is going to go a long way.
We have a really interesting comment in here from Laura, and I'm wondering whether or not she would like to speak to it. Laura Buchanan, you've made a really interesting comment as well.
Is it related to the topic?
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I just got totally carried away, and we've got a beer here as well. So.
Okay, I did unmute you, Abir, so I don't know if you want to say more about that.
If you're trying to talk, Abir, you are muted. There should be a little microphone icon in the corner of your page, and you can click on. But if you don't want to talk, that's totally fine as well.
So let me, while we wait to see if he wants to talk or not, I'll just make a comment to that, and then you can go to your next one, Jody. I think that, and it's funny, prior to this today, Quinn and Jody and myself were having a bit of a team meeting about some things, and I was giving Quinn a bit of a hard time about his vaping, and I've outed him, and he's probably gonna be mad at me
in front of all of my friends here.
Oh, Wally.
But I was just telling him, it's even important that people sort of not use vaping as a medication for these kinds of things, right? And the reason for it is because there's that emotional connection that comes with, hey, this made me feel better. And so the challenge or the concern related to things like that, and like Quinn said, it's not so much am I shopping online, is my shopping online out of the ordinary? Is my vaping out of the ordinary? Is, you know, these other things that I'm doing beyond the normal for my life, or under the normal for my life? And I think that the concern there is that those kinds of things, if we're not careful about them, can become habitual / addictive if we let them go too far, because then our brain actually starts creating new neural pathways that says, okay, now anytime I'm feeling upset or stressed or struggling, it's going to fire off saying it wants you to shop or to do whatever it is you're going to do. So I think it's important, but I guess the answer to that is, I think it's important to just acknowledge, is this different than the norm? And if it is, why am I doing it? And what are the feelings underneath that? And if you can understand what those are, then you can figure out some alternative ways to address those emotions. And that's back to what we were saying before about, it's not the feeling isn't the problem, but if you're now shopping abnormally because of it, that's the challenge. And so how do we replace that behavior with something that's going to be much more healthy and helpful for you? So Jody, you had another thing.
No, I just want to just say, a lot of people are saying I'm putting things into the shopping cart and I'm coming back later and making sure that I actually need it as well. And someone said that they're taking a break in their relationship with Amazon Prime. But one thing that got me really excited, and I read it out loud and then my brain went on fire, so I skipped a bit here, and that's why you said, is this related? And it's not at all. But one person said, I'm hearing about taking care of myself so that I can better support others and being somewhat productive in my self-care by doing something that brings me joy and satisfaction. But as a woman in a neoliberal society, I feel I've been socialized to see my self-care as being for others or supporting the idea of productivity. And I really want to validate what you've said and say that I get that. It's really a situation where I feel the same thing. A lot of my self-care in the last few days has been, or what I perceive to be my self-care, is to take care of my family and to make sure that I'm doing the homeschooling and the working and I think for the first 2 weeks of being in my house, it was like crazy spotless. My self-care, or I thought that my self-care was taking care of everything and making sure that everything was so organized that there was nothing out of place, in service of people in my home. And I had to take a step back from that and say, you know what, better self-care for me is to go into my bedroom right now and close the door and shut everybody in my family out for a little while. And not do that, and not bake the cookies and the cinnamon buns and polish the floor. I don't do that when it's not a pandemic. Let's just be clear on that. So I really heard that very loud and clear, and I wonder about other women who are hearing the same thing.
I do see that we still have a few questions that haven't been answered here. I wonder if we can pivot and discuss them.
To Jamie Medeiros. I don't know if you see that one. But
yeah, so Jamie had asked any idea on how to approach interactions with people who are wrapped up in conspiracy theory anxiety. I guess, so I both have a few thoughts on that, and I'm a massive hypocrite. So I need you to understand that because conspiracy theories, particularly right now, I think are dangerous and they make me very angry. And so sometimes I don't follow my own advice on this issue. I try to, but here's my advice. Conspiracy theories aren't about the conspiracy theory. It's not about what they're believing or what they're saying. It's about someone that's scared, right? And so checking in separate from that Facebook post and saying, hey, are you okay? How's everything? How's life? That can tend to be a lot more effective than telling them that, no, the science doesn't actually work that way. Because they're digging in on that piece. It's becoming part of their identity. But that identity is coming out of a place of fear and a place of anxiety and a place of feeling out of control. And so helping them with that long term has more payoffs. But I want you to know that that doesn't change things overnight. And so engage in that in a way that's safe for you, right? It's not your responsibility to fix them. Do it where and when you can and are able, right? But that's not on you to do.
I unmuted Jamie. I don't know if she wants to say more about her situation or that, but if you do, Jamie, you're able to speak.
Thanks, I appreciate it. So it's actually not a participant, it's a close family member who has kind of been harassing all the other family members every single day with new things. And now it's taken to a point of being like very religious and very, it's very much harassment, to be completely frank. And so we're kind of all just sort of figuring out how to go about interacting with her. And when I saw that it was posted on the slides, I jumped on it. I messaged our family members and I said, I'm going to try and get some input here. Because, you know, I honestly, when I was interacting with her, I treated it like I was talking to a participant, the same sort of way. So yeah, I just wasn't sure if there was other ways to go about, you know, saying that I don't want to engage in this discussion without being offensive to her, kind of thing.
So I'm going to actually throw out what's become over the years a bit of a cliche response, but it's still an accurate response. And I also want to, I guess, acknowledge what Quinn was saying is absolutely true. First of all, I think it's important to understand behavior is language. So that behavior that they're exhibiting, it's saying something that for whatever reason they can't say with their words. And so is it that they're scared themselves, whatever? So it might be helpful to even respond with that kind of acknowledgement, just like, you know, it sounds like this whole thing is really upsetting you or really bothering you, right? That's kind of a general response that you can share with them in a supportive way to get them to potentially talk or uncover maybe some of their fears or worries related to it. But if that's not going to help, or if they're still going to persist in that behavior, then it comes back to your own self-care. You and your family have to take care of yourselves. And I think it's really important to use I messages, right? You don't want to offend them by saying you're really causing a problem with the family. That's going to be probably an unhelpful way to say it, but you can acknowledge your own feelings. And you can say, I'm feeling very frustrated by all of these questions. I'm feeling that this is difficult for me to hear all of this. And they can't argue with how you feel, right? They can't argue with what you're saying they're doing. And it's helpful then, once you take responsibility for your own feelings related to it, they can then go, oh. And now I'm not going to say that's a foolproof method, but it's one way to look at it in avoiding being offensive yourself back to them, right? So, but at some point in time, if it gets too difficult, you and your family members may have to make some of those hard decisions. And those hard decisions are potentially, you know what, we can't do this anymore. So until this kind of behavior calms down, we're going to have to kind of disconnect. And there's going to be some guilt that will come with that. Trust me, you will feel guilty because you will feel like, oh, we're abandoning another family member or whatever. No, you are taking care of yourself, because again, the whole theme to all this is, what good are you to other people if you are in a bad place yourself? And if their behavior is causing you extreme anxiety as well, or upset feelings, then that's not healthy. And you need to find a way to disconnect from that. So those are my 2 bits.
I really want to honor the time that we have because we are running out. But Wally, there's one other, there's two other issues in the, or questions in the Q&A that I think maybe would be really worthy of being addressed right now. Not that everything else is not worthy, that's not the right word, but Debbie has said sleeping is becoming an even bigger issue, and then I've found myself self-medicating to sleep, and that's not helping. Any suggestions on that?
Yeah, great question. Important. Quinn, you know, I do have a couple thoughts, but anybody else have a comment there?
I think one of the first things—
I'm sorry, I was responding via text to another person that was chatting about another issue during this time. Can we start that again?
Yeah. Debbie's saying she's finding herself self-medicating to help her sleep. And
yes.
it's not really helping. So she's looking for suggestions.
I think at that point, we probably want to point you back to your medical professional. And my suggestion then would be to be absolutely honest with that person. Very often medical professionals get the version of events that we want to give them, that we find the least invasive or least embarrassing or whatever. Be absolutely honest. And I think it's completely okay to say, listen, I am so emotionally bound up in what's going on right now that I'm having incredible difficulty sleeping, and I found myself doing these things to try to get to sleep. Be absolutely upfront about that with your medical professional and see what they have to say, because that's certainly the route that I'm taking with my lack of sleep currently, and working through those processes. And you know, it's probably a better move than anything we could probably put together here on the webinar.
Now, I will totally agree with Quinn, but I think there is a caveat there, and that is that depending upon your scenario and your situation, with what's going on right now, you may have difficulty getting in touch with your medical professional. But I'm not suggesting you don't do that, because that could be a problem. I think it would be important to do that. In the meantime, though, or as you're working to make that contact, something that I would suggest is that most of the time, the reason people are having difficulty sleeping is because their mind is not shutting off. And they've got multiple things going through their brain that they're not aware of. And, you know, at least it's happening on a subconscious level oftentimes. And so people are unable to shut down when they go to sleep. And so their body is just constantly on the go, and their brain is on the go. So this is where something really important comes into play, called mindfulness. And I think there's lots of ways you can do it, and there's lots of resources out there. You just Google mindfulness. You know, a lot of people, there's sort of a division about meditation and things like that. You know, some people think it's hokey, some people think it's great. But I'm going to tell you that finding a way to clear your mind of things and be in touch with your body, be in touch with your breathing and your heart rate, and you know, and just kind of become more intensely familiar with the senses that are around you, you know, the smells and the different things, and allow that other stuff to sort of disappear, will do wonders for your, you know, ability to relax your brain. And so I would highly recommend you looking into ways to practice some mindfulness on a regular basis, and probably even just before you try to go to bed. Try to do some of those exercises. And also, it's not only important to sort of unplug more so than usual now, but make sure that you're not spending screen time right before you go to bed as well. And so even if it's a video game, that's challenging to do right before you go to bed because your brain is so active. But if you're also looking at the screen, watching and listening to things related to this pandemic, that's going to just wire you before you go to sleep. So I would consider some of those things in your efforts to tame that a little bit.
Linda also in Nelson mentions, reading the news right before bed, and how many of us do that on our phones or whatever. And that's really playing on my mind when I am trying to put my phone in another room completely. Wally, I do want to make sure that we're wrapping up, but there is one last one that I really feel is important because it fits with this as well. What advice you have for individuals who already suffer from depression, but now they've been told to isolate as well?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Quinn spoke a lot to this earlier, actually, where, there was some terminology that was kind of changing for a while through all of this, changing things from self-isolation to physical isolation, because in physical distancing, right? Yeah, we might have to do physical distancing, but it's important to keep the social connections alive. And even if that has to do with just, if Facebook is what works for you, then use it. But I would take advantage of the tools like Zoom or FaceTime or
Facebook Messenger also has video options. Discord has a video messaging option. Those last two are free and quite stable during high traffic times. All of these things, Google Meets, as well as Google Hangouts is still apparently a thing. And and so all of these things are options. Video chat with people. My partner recently chatted with a friend of hers and had a few glasses of wine while they chatted, right? And just sat there and almost kind of had dinner together and hung out. Now this is something they would have done for fun on the weekend anyways, and they did the exact same thing, but they did it using video messaging, and that made them feel so much better about the scenario and so much better about being able to connect with people. Finding ways to do that is something that I would really want to recommend. I do want to say though that if you are a person experiencing depression and you're having a time in your life where you're having some symptoms, depending on what those symptoms are, it's important to reach out and get help during this very difficult time. So I really want to encourage anybody who is having symptoms right now, or those symptoms are being exacerbated by the current situation, to really reach out and make sure that they get the help that they need.
Yeah, and there's lots of options in terms of even online counseling. Those things are readily available, and even more so now because of this. A lot of therapists and stuff have had to go to that avenue, and so take advantage of that. The last thing I would say as well is work to keep as much normality in your life as possible. I think that's part of the challenge, is that people see that life has changed so much, and it's something that's out of your control, and so then it starts to feel bleak and hopeless and those kinds of things. Whereas if you can, again, focus on those elements of life that you can control, and keep routine. If medication is part of your daily life, don't change that routine. Make sure you stick with your medication and those kinds of things. But I would also be very careful about your thoughts. I shared with Jody and Quinn the other day this little formula about how our thoughts determine how we feel, which then determine how we behave. And so if those feelings are changing, and the feelings of depression are building and enhancing, then I would also suggest that there's a likelihood that the way you think about the current situation is also changed. And so you might want to go back to evaluating, what are the thoughts going through my mind about this, and then deciding, are they real? Are they realistic? Do they make sense if I really stop and think about them? And what is the reality of things? And again, what are the elements of it that I can actually control? And if I can't control it, then it's actually something that you can let go of. and it doesn't have to be a worry for you because you can't do anything about it anyway. But there are things that you can do something about, and so stick with those.
I can tell by the number of participants, we are over time, but I can tell by the number of people who have stayed on this webinar over the amount of time that we've allotted that there's a great interest in this. And I think it's a really important conversation to keep going. But I also want to honor people's time, because I know that even though this isn't the normal, this is the new normal. Wally just talked about routine, and it's important to stick to time. So I am, on that note, going to go back to screen sharing my screen. And I'm going to talk about our upcoming webinars. We are out of our normal, so keep a watch on training.caeh.ca for upcoming webinars on what's happening. And also a teaser for what's coming. We are going to be doing regular self-care help emails and perhaps a few more webinars on this topic in the coming months through CAEH TTA. So that's going to be coming. Everybody who's on this call today will receive an email about self-care topics. If you don't wish to receive these emails and you want to be taken off of that list, absolutely just send an email to any one of us and we will take you off of it. But we want to really start sending out some self-care stuff to folks in the sector, just to remind ourselves about this. I think that it is so important, and we want to keep reminding you about that. Wally, you had a couple of other things that you wanted to mention.
Oh yeah, I guess I put them on the slides hoping they would show up automatically, but you must be on the desktop app.
Okay.
But that's okay. I had found Quinn was talking about finding any way you can to get some physical exercise in, and I had found the other day a couple of pictures, so I posted one on our slide deck of somebody who had made a homemade desk for their treadmill. And so even if you feel like you can't stop working or whatever, you know, you can take the clothes off of the treadmill that are probably hanging there and so forth, and you can actually put a desk over top of the arms, and you can work on your computer or whatever you want to do and keep moving. But I also wanted to mention another one of trainers that I've worked with in the past. His name is Brian Dean Williams he's from Vancouver. He's also very knowledgeable in this area, and he's another mental health professional. He's done a lot of trainings for me in the area of trauma-informed care and team self-care and things like that. Him and one of his colleagues are starting to host a free virtual evening. It's happening on Monday evenings from 7:30 to 8:30 on supporting resilience for frontline workers.
Which time zone, Wally?
That would be Pacific time. Sorry, that would be Pacific time. And they'll be talking about, you know, meditation and mindfulness and all those kinds of things. But it's designed for frontline workers, and you can connect with him at connect@briandeanwilliams.com, and then they'll send you registration information. So we'll post that on our slide deck, and the slides in PDF version and a recording of this webinar will be available by the end of today or tomorrow morning at the latest. So you can access all that information there.
If anybody has any questions or wants to send us any more information that we can distribute to this group or share with the rest of you, you are able to reach all of us at our first name at caeh.ca. So Jody at caeh.ca, Quinn at caeh.ca, or Wally at caeh.ca. We welcome communication with you at any time, and if you're looking for resources or want to share something with us, please reach out.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks to Quinn. Did a great job. And we're glad that you all could participate.
We
Have a great day, guys.
take care of yourselves out there.